Hello, everyone. Here we are. Is it already the third? God, now fast. Hey, everyone. Brandon, Pedro, Javier.
Good to see you,
How are
Joe.
you all doing? Yeah, thank you.
Good to
You
see
too. You
Javier.
too.
Pedro.
Yeah, good to see you all again.
Awesome, awesome. So, but Brandon, last time you were missing. What's up?
Oh, I was in a whole nother continent. I was over in
What?
Africa for a month.
That's pretty nice. Pretty nice. Much better than spending this stand up with us, right? So,
I don't know about that. Different, certainly.
it's yeah, different. Exactly. Really great. It's really great to have you back here, of course, for all the updates and all the things that we're going to talk about for the .NET MAUI Community Toolkit. Basically, also maybe a little bit about the Xamarin Community Toolkit. Who knows, and what else? I mean, it's also your time. You there in the chat. You there, the viewer at home. So if you have anything to ask us at the very end, we'll have some dedicated time for Q&A. But if you have any questions that we can maybe pop up right now, we'll just go into that. Or there's people in the chat who can answer stuff for you as well. So don't be shy. Tell us where you're from. That's also always a good idea. Share anything that you'd like to share. And other than that, I think it's about to get started. So first thing kind of on the agenda we have is a new release that we released, because that's what you do with releases. And which version are we? That's like 1.0.0 pre 3 then? This is the third stand-up? I don't know, something about that. Maybe pre 2, pre 3, I don't know. And to be honest, we didn't do much code for this sprint, if you want to call it like that. Because we've been very busy with planning all the work. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But we've done a little release to, bump up the .NET 6 version, make it compatible with all the stuff there. So that's what you'll be seeing. I think actually Brandon might know about this. Is the kind of like the .NET MAUI community. I'm going to keep community toolkit. I keep being confused with all these names. The markup extensions, that's kind of like already complete and usable, right? That works.
Yeah, pretty much. That was a lot easier to port over. It was really just more copy paste because there's no platform specific stuff for the markup extensions. So those are totally complete, like the feature wise. So all the APIs for everybody using the markup extensions from the Xamarin Community Toolkit are totally available in the MAUI Community Toolkit. And so the other nice thing is, because there's no platform specific code, we're able, with the markup extensions, its NuGet package literally just targets .NET 6. So we don't have to worry about Windows support, Mac OS support, iOS, Android support. It's all just there because it only has to target .NET 6. So let us know, please, if you're using it. Give us some feedback. If there is anything we did miss, we're happy to add it. But yeah, as far as we know, markup is ready to go. We'll still probably have some right now it's pre 2, the NuGet package version. Maybe there'll be a pre 3, pre 4, but should be very small incremental things. That one should be, it's basically a release candidate at this point.
Yeah.
But
and
like
I think we already talked about this in a previous episode, that we also kind of like where the Xamarin Forms Community Toolkit, the Xamarin Community Toolkit kind of like has it all in one repo. So also the markup extensions, we now made that 2 separate repos so that the releases are also not linked to each other. So you won't see, the markup extensions have been bumped each time without actually bringing anything new. So that's kind of useless, and that might make you happy, like there's a new release, what's new, and there's nothing. That's always a sad moment. So we kind of like decouple those things, and now they're actual separate repos. And as Brendan says, the markup extensions are basically already done, because it's just a different model to do all the things that are already there, basically. There might be a few different changes as MAUI maybe changes some things. But yeah, so that's in a more mature state right now. But I think this is a nice moment in time to kind of transition to what we actually have been doing, Brandon, which is planning all the features that are hopefully coming to the .NET MAUI Community Toolkit, or not, or what are we going to do with that?
So much planning. So
much.
I'll tell you what, I'm gonna share my screen here, and let's see. Let's make this nice and big because it's going to be, there's been a lot of planning. So let's make sure we go full screen. So this is the GitHub repo. Just let me drop this in the chat just in case everyone wants to follow along.
And maybe it's also good if you can do it to bump up the font a little bit.
Oh, of course. Good call. Thank you. All right. Now
there we go.
So, like Gerald said, this last month we've been doing a ton of work, but it's all been internal stuff, planning. I've been having meetings with the Microsoft Docs team because we're going to need docs, right? So let's find make a home for the new docs. So we should have a new Microsoft Docs GitHub repo this week or next week where we can start adding to. But also, we've been working on the new feature workflow. So in the Xamarin Community Toolkit, we got all these awesome features, and for the most part, almost all of those are coming over to the .NET MAUI Toolkit. But one of the tough things for us as the maintainers of the Xamarin Community Toolkit was the pull requests would kind of sometimes come out of nowhere. And I don't mean that in a bad way. We got a lot of awesome features that we'll say quote unquote came out of nowhere. But what did happen sometimes was folks would write all this code, spend hours working on this, open up a pull request, and sometimes we had to close them. And we felt really, really bad. There was a lot of talks internally about like how can we make this work? And it's I don't know if we can. And so to ensure that we don't waste anybody's time, we don't have anybody writing code that just gets closed in a PR. We have a new workflow that, if I'm being honest, I heavily borrowed from the C# design team. So if you've ever requested a new feature for C#, the language, or if you didn't know, you can go to the C# GitHub repo and request a new feature for the language. And so I saw how they were doing their workflow, and I was like, that sounds like a great idea. So that's what we'll be doing going forward. So here's our README for the MAUI Community Toolkit. And basically everything is going to start with a discussion. So if you haven't seen on GitHub has discussions where these aren't reporting an issue. This is just, hey, a place to chat about things. So like we can open up a new discussion. Like we have discussions about the media element, data grid support. And this is where new features can come to fruition. So if you have an awesome idea, like, I don't know, something like a data grid, you can start a new discussion. And in this discussion is where the back and forth will happen. This is where we'll chat about what is the feature, what would be its API surface, what problems does it solve, what potential problems could it raise or in the future, or are there any alternatives? Is there already a NuGet package that does this that maybe we should leverage that instead, or maybe we can loop in that NuGet package owner? So we can have all this discussion first and basically come to that conclusion on what this new feature will be, what it'll look like. And once everything is fully fleshed out, once we have a real feature with with APIs and how it's going to be implemented, and we can then open a proposal. So what we have here is, if you go to the issues tab today, well, you'll see all these proposals that we created last month. So like I said, we've been doing a lot of work. We've got 80 open proposals. But if we want to open a new one, so when you go to create a new issue, you'll see a couple things. So we have bug reports. Obviously, we want you to report bugs. Let us know what needs to be fixed. There's also open a new proposal. But then there's also this link that we were just chatting about. Like if we want to propose a new feature or even just ask a question, this will take you to that discussions tab. So you can have the discussion there. But right. So once that discussion's been had, once we've kind of come to an agreement, between everybody in the community who's chimed in on the discussion, then we can open up this feature proposal. And so when you do that, it comes with this template. So you won't forget anything. This is pretty in depth. So let me open up one that or let me open up one that we've already created. So here's what it'll look like once you've created it. So it'll include the summary. The detailed design is missing. Is that my fault? Did I comment that out? Let's go to maybe tab view, detailed design. There we go. So this is your API surface, or you can even say like, this is what's going to go in tab view.shared, and talk about this is how you use it. So include both XAML and C#. Like Gerald mentioned at the top, we have a whole C# markup extensions NuGet package that will also be able to leverage these features. So we want to make sure you not only have a XAML usage, but also here's how you would use it in C#. And then that's when we have the proposal open. So hopefully by this time, the discussion's already sorted all this out. This should basically be copy paste from the discussion. But this is the new proposal. Now, what happens next? So maybe the easier way to look at this is we have this whole GitHub project board, which is pretty cool too. So once you open that proposal, it then gets championed. So as a member of the team here, one of us chooses to champion this proposal. So right here we have an is in range converter, and maybe Gerald's in love with that and says, I've always wished we had a converter to see if something's in range. So Gerald will choose to champion that. And what that means is Gerald's taken it upon himself to basically be the champion of this new feature, this feature proposal. And Gerald is going to bring it to this meeting. So every month we're going to be talking about the proposals that have been championed here. And this is where, in this case, Gerald would, actually, I see you have semantic order view right here. So Gerald could champion this today. And if we have time, maybe we'll do that as well. But basically, Gerald is its champion. Gerald says, I think we should do this. Here's why. And then we vote. So as a team, we'll vote to say yay or nay. And as long as it gets a 50% or greater than 50% approval from the core team, of which there's 5 of us. So 3 out of the 5 agree, say, yep, Gerald, we agree with you. Then it's approved. And that's when we start writing the code. So what does this all mean right now for us today? For us as the community today? I know, Juan, this is all written in GitHub. So you can see I'm on the projects tab here in the community toolkit /Maui repo. So you can come look at it. And Juan, that's a great segue, because what this means for us as the community, if we want to start working on code today, well, look, there's already been 55 proposals that have been approved. And truthfully, a lot of these, actually, all of these have come from the Xamarin Community Toolkit. But what you can do is if you come into and just search for issues with the help wanted tag. So help wanted. And actually the tag even says it. It says this proposal has been approved and ... But that ... is we're looking for somebody to write the code. So in this case, all these proposals have been approved. They've been championed and they're ready for code. So for example, if I wanted to do one, like maybe I see color conversion extension. So I come in here and cool, a lot of this is already done. So some of the code's been written, but it's still missing unit tests. It still needs to be added to our sample app. We still need documentation. So if I wanted to claim this, all I would do is come in and say, I would leave a comment, say, assign this to me, or I'd love to do it, or I'm going to start working on the unit tests today. Great. Then, yep, we'll assign it to you and you're off and running. You can write the code, open it up. And once the pull request is done with the unit tests, the samples, the documentation, then we move you to the next state in the flow. So once it's been approved, then we'll get that pull request in, we'll get the pull request approved. And then we'll park you here where we have pending documentation. So right now, nothing has documentation approved because we're still waiting on that GitHub repo from the Microsoft Docs team. Because if you didn't know, the official Microsoft Docs are all written in GitHub, which is pretty cool. So I've been working internally with the team to get us a repo for this. Should be coming this week or next. But we'll park that pull request here until the documentation's written, because the documentation for the official docs.microsoft.com docs, that's going to live in a different repo. And we don't want to lose track of that. To be honest, we did lose track of that on some of the features in the Xamarin Community Toolkit. And I know a lot of you are aware of that because you've let us know that it's like, hey, where's the docs for this? And you're like, oh, like, good point. We totally missed that. So this is going to ensure we don't miss any documentation. So basically what we're going to end up doing is we're going to hold the pull request open until the documentation's done in the other repo. Then once the documentation's done, we can finally move it to completed and merge in all the new features. So it feels like a lot, but really, I think the two takeaways are, one, if you want to get started today, check out our issues, find a help wanted one, leave a comment to claim it. We'll assign it to you. And then we'll also guide you along the process as well. So when you open up the pull request, maybe you got the unit tests in there, you've included the documentation, but you forgot to add it to the sample app. No worries, we'll let you know. And so we'll guide you along the way, but yeah, come in and claim one. We'll assign it to you. We'll take off the help wanted tag to let folks know that you're working on it. And then we'll move you along this project board right here. And so if you didn't, don't worry about memorizing anything today, because everything is written down. So here, if you click the projects tab, the whole workflow is outlined here. Or if you look in the README, that whole workflow is outlined here as well. So look for ones that say help wanted. If there's a new feature you want to add that we haven't already added, that's cool too. Just open up a discussion and we can start chatting about how to bring it into the toolkit in a future release.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a very good overview. And I really like kind of like the champion term is kind of new to me. So it might be new to other people as well. But yeah, it's really kind of more like, you are the PM, the project manager, the person responsible, basically. That's how I see it. Brendan, correct me if I'm wrong. Like, the person who's kind of like, responsible for that it will go in and have all the tests and have all the documentation and have all the things to make the feature complete, and to make sure that it's going in while you might not be the person who is actually doing the work. You could be the person doing the work, or you can share the work or do whatever. But kind of like the person championing it is someone who believes in this feature, who's going to defend it, who's going to make sure that it is going to be implemented. Is that kind of correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And
perfect.
And yeah, because this is the community toolkit. So we want to make sure we get as much community contributions as well. There's only 5 of us. Andre wasn't able to join us today, but the 5 of us can't do all of this, especially since we don't get paid to do this. This is just a nights and weekends thing. So I don't know if somebody wants to sponsor the toolkit and we can all quit our jobs, maybe. But yeah, it's a team effort. We all need to chip in. And yeah, that champion. Yeah, you're the one, like you said, Gerald. You're the project manager. You make sure the unit tests are there, the documentation's done. You're also kind of the one, I would say, who wants it, because I'm sure exactly lots of us will want it. But since you are the champion, you probably know it better. Like, for example, I don't use XAML. So if there's a new feature that comes that's very XAML specific, I'm probably not going to champion it because I don't really use XAML and I wouldn't know how to use it. So you're probably also the expert in that area as well.
Yep, gotcha. That makes perfect sense. Javier, were you going to say something? Yeah. Or
no? Yeah, also share with the people that we will share later what are maybe the plans to start contributing, etc. But it's good to share that also if a proposal is championed, that also means that we'll be part of the upcoming of the next community stand-up. We will share, of course, all the credits, and we will showcase some demos in the upcoming events, etc. So that's also great. And I think that we had a more defined plan that we had before. I hope that the people really like it. Also, I think that we increase the importance. We are more aligned with what the Windows Community Toolkit is doing in their way with the documentation stuff and other parts that are really important. So yeah, more defined steps, and I really like the concept of the champion, but also share with the community that we will interact more with them in other ways, like here in the community startup. So that's also great.
Yeah, and the other thing is, when we do champion these new proposals and we bring them to the meetings and we vote on them, just because the vote doesn't pass doesn't mean the feature is dead. It not by any means, because maybe there's something where I look at it and go, oh, maybe this should return. It should be async task instead of async void. And maybe Javier looks at it and goes, there's probably a better way to implement the XAML type converter. And so basically we could just kick it back and defer it to the next meeting and say, take a look at these suggestions. And you know what? If we fix the async await stuff or we fix the value converter stuff, then absolutely we can approve it. So I don't want anybody to feel disheartened if something doesn't pass, because the votes can very much be like, yes, if, or yes, when. It's not a no, kill it, close it, burn it.
You're never gonna do it. Never. No, so that's definitely good to know. That's definitely good to know. But also with this, we, Brandon, I say we, but it actually means you, have seen this being used in like the regular .NET Standup, ASP.NET. I don't know, it came from somewhere. So the process is pretty C#. The process is pretty mature. I think they've been using it for a while now, so it probably works very well. But if we find something that doesn't work for us, or something that works better, or have other ideas, then that's definitely up for discussion as well, and we can see if we can change anything there to make it better. So we're, again, I can repeat this all day. It's all about the community, because it's called the Community Toolkit. So just that we happen to have a little bit more rights doesn't say that we don't appreciate your input or we appreciate your help. So just while we were talking here, Brandon and Javier were talking here, it came to mind also because Pedro kind of reminded me that it's Hacktober, Hacktoberfest. So I just, while we were talking, put that topic on the GitHub repository. So if you decide to open a pull request with us, that will also count towards like the Hacktoberfest goodness. You can do, I think you can get a t-shirt, or you can plant a tree in your name if that's something that you prefer as well. So, because I think with all of this, we didn't really say it like very clearly, but I think with this, it's kind of now also opened, help wanted. So it's open for you to come out and help us with all the stuff that we need to be doing. And it's kind of like, I'm not going to decide for anyone what is simple for you or not, but it's kind of like low-hanging fruit, right? Because a lot of code is already there in the Xamarin Community Toolkit, and now you can port it over to .NET MAUI. So, the feature's already there. We probably want to rewrite something. It's not going to be copy-paste just like that, because there is some stuff in there that we would love to change or get rid of. So definitely be sure to have a good close look at the code that you're going to kind of take over. But, the features are there. The infrastructure is there. It's clear what you need to do. So the PRs should be relatively easy to do.
And we are trying also to have some basic bits ready, like, for example, we already have all the converters and all the behaviors ported from the Xamarin Community Toolkit to .NET MAUI, but now we are already porting things like, for example, effects or controls, new views, etc. So we are trying to have at least one view or one effect in the repository to showcase and have a good way to follow and learn what are the basic changes between the FX implementation in Xamarin Forms and the FX implementation in .NET MAUI. I can just say that there aren't any big change. The FX code is mostly the same. The only important change in this case is, for example, how to register the FX. So Yeah, we are trying to have basic stuff, but by the way, and Brandon is just showing that we have some important conversations about some topics, like for example, what will happen with effects or what will happen with behaviors. And Brandon, if you want to explain this specific topic.
Sorry, Javier, I didn't mean to cut you off. Actually, I didn't know my screen was going to pop up when I started sharing, so my apologies.
No, but it's a good moment, and it's a good topic.
I saw the segue, and I thought it'd be perfect since you mentioned effects and behaviors. So I was actually going to hand this over to Pedro, because Pedro's been... Wow, Pedro, you impress me every day. How much Pedro follows along to every issue, every pull request on the Maui repo. And he brought up to the team, to the toolkit team, he's like, hey guys, it looks like effects aren't maybe the recommended way to do stuff. So should we do that for the toolkit? And I said, Pedro, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'll bet Javier probably knows. Maybe Gerald knows. So yeah, Pedro, why don't you take it from here and fill us all in on what's going on?
Sure. And first place, thanks for the compliments. I'm very glad to hear that. And so I was looking into the MAUI issues and PRs, and I was seeing that the effects APIs from the Xamarin Forms will not be ported into the .NET MAUI at the first place. Because if you look to the history, the effects API just exists when we needed to create something like a handler, but not need to create a full handler to implement some feature. For example, an entry without border. You can just use the effect and remove the border from the entry. It's very lightweight. And that was used because Xamarin Forms wasn't built on top of multi-target approach. And now .NET MAUI is built on top of multi-target approach, so we have access to the platform-specific codes and on our one project. So we don't have platforms projects, head projects split by solutions. And later on, they bring that effects API to the .NET MAUI more to not break users, consumers, because it will be very, very hard to move everything that, to just use the .NET MAUI. So they bring that, but looks like that they will not invest too much time in improving that API. So my proposal here is like, let's see if you can do in another way. Instead of using effects, you can use behaviors because everything's in multi-target, so we have access to our platform-specific codes. And also this week, I was in the .NET MAUI Check meeting. That is a meeting with the library maintainers from Xamarin Forms NuGet packages, and then that will port those packages to the .NET MAUI. And I asked this question as well, and Shane told me that we can leave the API structure, the API way. We just need to remove the routing effect part, so you don't need that part anymore. We can just use the shared code layer. So that adds one more possibility to us to use that. So I need to spike a little bit more to design some API or some kind of another way to do things. But for example, if you scroll down a little bit on the code snippet part, we have that new API that is appended to mapping. And one that I can see that we could use that is the visual feedback effect, I believe there is effect. So this API is basically like when in the case of that snippet, when the background property changed, execute this code as well. So we can attach actions to be executed when existing property changes. So for example, on the feedback API, the feedback effect that we already have on the Xamarin Community Toolkit, we can do appended to mapping, for example, to the I pressed property. So when the user presses the property, we can change the background of that effect, that feedback, and when release, we can change the background again. So, that gives us more room to keep using effects, or look if you can migrate those effects to another API that will be improved by the team. So it's basically that.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, an interesting conversation. So if anyone wants to give their feedback, please participate in this conversation. And the main topic is we still support effects to allow a smooth transition from Xamarin Forms to the .NET MAUI. But the FX was like a easy way to access to native controls and do small changes or small interactions or something more simple than a custom renderer. And now there are several ways to achieve the same. Like, for example, you can access directly to the mapper, right? And with the mapper, access to any action or to any property, and there directly you can get the native control and do whatever you want. So that don't means that you will not be able to use FX with .NET MAUI. That's okay. The main question is what we want to maintain and what is the best approach for the toolkit. That's the main topic in this case.
Maybe one way to ask the question is, if I was building a new app today in .NET MAUI, would I ever or should I ever use effects?
It's a good question. I guess that in short term, in the first probably months of .NET MAUI, I expect a lot of use still of effects, because probably many developers will just port their code from Xamarin Forms to .NET MAUI. The code will be exactly the same. I mean, the effect API is the same, the event to attach, detach, etc. And then the only important change that is used one line of code is how to register the effect, because remember that now in .NET MAUI we have well, if you try some old preview, we had the startup class. Now is program class. We did this change to align between different Microsoft frameworks and have exactly the same APIs in this startup class. That is at the end a way to configure your application, register your services, your effects, your handlers, etc. So the only change is just add this line to register your effect. So in short term, probably many developers will reuse their code, reuse their the existing effects, etc. But in this case, with the toolkit, I have some doubts about that, because maybe we can promote easier ways that will allow more options to extend. And I guess that, for example, using the mapper, there are several ways to maybe override some part, etc. So I don't know. It's an interesting discussion. For now, let leave that open, receive all the feedback, and we'll see what happened with that. But this is an important one. So if you remember, that is the 124 one. Leave your feedback there.
All right, perfect. So I see one. I don't know if we want to go into like maybe kind of sample champion one, if that makes sense. Because I see a question in the chat. I saw a ticket from Victor. Let me bring it up. Actually, I saw a ticket on GitHub Maui about promoting Delegate Week Event Manager. I commented a few days ago. Why not promote the object model from XCT to natively Maui? So Brandon, I see you are kind of like the champion for this. So is this something that you're gonna defend here?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll leave Victor's comment up there.
All right, perfect.
Because there's two things going on here. So Delegate Week Event Manager. That was basically just expanding. Well, if I'm being honest, I copy pasted Xamarin Forms Week Event Manager. And the only thing I did for Delegate Week Event Manager was the Xamarin Forms implementation. Like if you look at xamarin.forms.week event manager, it requires a event handler type, which most events are event handlers, but not all of them. Like you may not know, you can use an action for an event. So you can say, instead of public event handler, my event, you could say public event action, my event, or delegates. So public event delegate, my event. And so Delegate Week Event Manager was a way to allow for delegates to be used. And like I said, it was literally just copy pasting Xamarin Forms' implementation and changing the word event handler to delegate. It was that easy. So yeah, I opened up a ticket on the Maui repo to bring that to Xamarin Forms. I'm sorry, to .NET MAUI. Woo, that's going to be a habit that's hard to break. So to bring that to .NET MAUI so that we don't have to essentially duplicate the same code in the MAUI toolkit. And especially if we can get that into MAUI before adding it into the toolkit, then we don't have to go through the maintenance phase, the deprecation phase, and it'll save time on the back end. So that's the story behind Delegate Week Event Manager. I did, just to fill everybody in, I asked the team about a month or so ago if I could sneak this in, and was told at the time, no, because the plan is to GA MAUI in a couple months. So we want to keep everything pretty much locked down. But once I heard that MAUI will be GA'd in Q2 of 2022, I saw a window of opportunity here. So thought I'd slide it in, and maybe we can get that in. But all that being said, that is a great example of exactly what the toolkit is here for. The toolkit is also meant to be a proving ground for features like this. So this Delegate Week Event Manager has been in the Xamarin Community Toolkit for, over a year now. And so we've proven that it works. We've proven that it's stable. We have all the unit tests to go with it. So let's promote that to the official .NET MAUI repo. So TBD on the Delegate Week Event Manager, Hugo. I'm hoping we can get that in. Otherwise, we'll find a home for it. The other part of that question was asking about why not promote object model. So there's two parts to this question. The first thing is object model, and maybe looks like my screen is still, okay. So object model will not be coming to the .NET MAUI Community Toolkit. You can see, let's see, somewhere in here, observable object, that's what we called it. So if we check this out, this one's already been closed, but don't fret. So there is already an observable object in the MVVM toolkit. So part of what we did with the .NET MAUI toolkit is we combined forces with the Windows Community Toolkit, who already had a toolkit called the MVVM toolkit, and it has observable object. So they've already got their docs written. They're good. They're ahead of us. But basically, we don't need to add it to the MAUI Community Toolkit because it's not MAUI specific. Observable objects very much a .NET thing, an MVVM thing, and it already exists in this toolkit. So this is what we'll be recommending going forward for the MVVM toolkit. And then there will also be, we just started discussions with the Windows Community Toolkit team about creating a community toolkit.common library and what we can each contribute to that. So maybe there's other things that aren't necessarily .NET MAUI specific that we can move into that common toolkit that both gets used by the MAUI toolkit and the Windows toolkit. So sharing code. So yeah, like I said, Victor, couple answers there. And to be honest, I don't know about promoting the observable object into .NET MAUI. I'll kick that over to Javier and Gerald. I mean, observable object has been a thing in the MVVM world forever, but it's also not necessarily framework dependent. Like, yeah, WPF users can use it. WinForms users can use it. Xamarin Forms users can use it. .NET MAUI users can use it. But is it really a .NET MAUI API? I don't know.
Good question. I think also, is this something, because you just mentioned, Brandon, with sharing code, trying to break up some things to more logical places maybe. And one of those things is also which came from the Windows Community Toolkit. They now have what they call the Community Toolkit.mvvm. Because, there's kind of this gray area, what belongs to an MVVM framework and what belongs into maybe a toolkit or what belongs in the box with .NET MAUI. I feel it also kind of depends who you ask and what their opinions are on, what is a framework or what is MVVM as a whole. I don't know. So, there's a lot of opinions and things going on as well. Yeah, so maybe it's in the MVVM that the link was just dropped down here. I don't know. Well, it says also, I'm just reading the chat just like you are. I'm basically just another viewer, but my camera's on. So the observable object is in there because probably for the good reason that Brandon just mentioned, like you can use it kind of like over multiple platforms, right? And that's also, this is a MVVM toolkit that you can use in UWP, maybe WPF. I didn't look into it in detail. You're going to probably use it in .NET MAUI because, you know, it just fills in the MVVM bits for whenever you use kind of like MVVM and Microsoft products. So, you know, I think that is kind of like the better place for it, I feel.
Agreed.
All right.
And yeah, I could see a world where if each framework did add the observable object class, like let's say .NET MAUI did and WPF did and UWP did, well, now there's going to be 10 different versions of it, and then things can get really messy. So
yeah, and that's also kind of like what we already kind of had going, right? Because right, if you've been here long enough and you're old like us, when we started the Xamarin Community Toolkit, we kind of like immediately came into discussion with the Windows Community Toolkit because they said like, hey, we have this, we're working on this MVVM framework and that already has XYZ, and now you're going to copy all these things. You're going to do the, I don't know, observable range collection, and we had a couple of those things that they said like, hey, we already have that. So why are you going to reinvent this? At that time, with like maybe the observable object and that kind of stuff, we couldn't share the code. People were asking us for this to keep it in one package, so we kind of like did it, but we were cautious to not add everything and pull in a complete MVVM framework into the Xamarin Community Toolkit. But now, you know, now we're in the bigger Community Toolkit space together with the Windows Community Toolkit, with this MVVM framework. So, you know, and it definitely makes sense to only have this one, because like Brendan just said, also from Xamarin Forms, I just copy and paste the thing. That's kind of like what we're trying to prevent with the Xamarin Community Toolkit and the .NET MAUI Community Toolkit with all the converters and behaviors and whatnot. So it would be very weird if we would do the copy and pasting for you, so you didn't have to do it, right? That kind of doesn't make sense. So we just want to have that object, that thing, once in the most logical place, and from there you can use it everywhere. So that's kind of like where this is going, I guess.
Yeah, and we also have the open action item. Someday I'll get to it. Yeah, someday soon. Is to our sample app that exists in the .NET MAUI toolkit repo. That sample app will have a dependency on community toolkit.mvvm. So it'll also use the MVVM toolkit. So you'll also see examples of how to use the .NET MAUI community toolkit stuff with the MVVM community toolkit stuff and just make awesome apps.
Yeah, for sure. And also in the MVVM toolkit already, there are many other classes that we also discussed in the past in the toolkit, and we copy paste many times, like async commands and, you know, many others. And this is again a conversation that we had in the past in the .NET MAUI team. Should we include that in the framework directly or not? Have sense or not? Well, we guess that the best approach for now is just offer all the controls being bindable that supports, of course, MVVM. And now we are thinking more also in C# and other options, as probably everybody knows. But having just one place where between all us iterate with the same class, with the same definitions, and share exactly the same between different frameworks, WinUI, MAUI, etc., is a big step forward. So definitely it's the approach to go. I shared in the chat, by the way, some of the classes like observable object and async command, etc. There are small differences with the definitions and the classes that we had in the past in the Xamarin Community Toolkit. But the good news in this case is like everything that is already in the MVVM toolkit have bigger implementations. So you will not miss things, you will have more functionality. So that's cool.
Yeah, that's also that's kind of like the last thing I'm going to say about this, because we got at least one other important thing on the agenda. But that's also kind of the thing, like if you have like all these implementations floating around, the Xamarin Community Toolkit one, this MVVM Toolkit one, then one is going to have this feature, and then they expect that on the other toolkit to pop up as well, and then the feature's not there, so that's frustrating. And then they're going to ask us, like, where's this feature? We're going to have to copy and paste again. Now it sounds like we're copy and pasting the whole toolkit together, but it's just not great for anyone, basically. So I think this is the best way forward. So one thing that we still have on the agenda, Brandon already touched upon it a little bit, I think, is that, of course, the news reached us that .NET MAUI is going to be pushed back to Q2 2022 instead of being released next month. Well, don't worry, it's still going to be released next month, but as a preview part of .NET 6. But we need a little bit more time to mature the whole thing, to make it better for you before we put it in your hands and say, go out and build awesome apps with this. So that's kind of what's going on. And because we have a dependency, like literally with the package and with everything, basically. It's our jobs. So we're very dependent. So our timelines are also kind of like connected, right? And that's what we done for the Xamarin Community Toolkit, like for the end of life. We were going to follow kind of like the same path. And for .NET MAUI, we were going to kind of release in November as well. I think we might just take a little vote, although I might see where this might be going. But can we raise hands for people who think that we should maybe then also move our .NET Community Toolkit together to Q2 as well? Yeah. Oh, Pedro. Oh, phew. Yeah.
Got majority.
Yeah. So what's your take in the chat? I see a couple of people there. What are your thoughts about that? I mean, I think the overall sentiment also with us is like, we would have loved to have .NET MAUI ready for you next month to play with, because it's going to be awesome. It's going to be new, but it's still going to be familiar. So we're disappointed about that, but I think we can all agree that it's for the better. We don't want to put some beta software, preview software in your hands and not have a great start with this. So I think it's good that we take this extra time to there we go, Nicholas, thank you so much. So to take this little more time to really mature it any further. And I think that's kind of like the same thing for the .NET MAUI Community Toolkit as well, because you see we etched out all these proposals. They're championed for most of them, but we still need to do a lot of implementation there. So I think if we're being very honest, then it's not too bad for us that it got postponed.
Oh no. Did we lose Gerald? That's okay. He looks great. So yeah, what we'll do then is we'll continue to follow the both the .NET MAUI release schedule for releasing the toolkit and also the Xamarin Form schedule for deprecating the Xamarin Community Toolkit, which we'll also publicly announce that too. I actually have a blog post written up that should be released or published next week that talks about how to contribute to the .NET MAUI toolkit. And so basically goes through that workflow stuff that we talked about today with the champions and the approvals, the discussions. But I'll add to the top of that a little note that says that we are also extending our deadline for the toolkit. So with that, it is time for Q&A. So I know there's been, lots and lots of chat. So what questions do you have specifically about the .NET MAUI Community Toolkit? If you have questions about life in general, we maybe can answer those, but we'll prioritize the toolkit questions first. Let's see, I'm scrolling back through the chat to see.
When you scroll, there is a request from Steve that will wish that the async command in the MVVM toolkit will have your no-repeat structure. So I think that we have some tasks to do in the MVVM toolkit, right?
Yeah. So Steve, what I was going to recommend is let's open up a feature request on the MVVM toolkit, because you are correct. Our async command that lives, we'll say today in the Xamarin Community Toolkit, has a feature that's called allows multiple executions. which is pretty cool because you can just say only execute this command once and don't allow it to execute again. And that's nice because then we don't have to have like an is busy variable and raise can't execute change. It kind of does all that for us, which is nice. So yeah, I'd like to add that. So I definitely recommend adding that as a feature request in the MVVM toolkit for sure. Welcome back, Gerald.
I see you managed to do this without me. I don't know what happened. Suddenly everything went black, and also my camera, my fancy camera, is overheating. So this is the lesser webcam. But
oh no, that's all right. We only have 5 minutes left, anyways. So hopefully we'll get you out before your camera melts.
Yeah, sure. So I see we are doing the Q&A, and you brought up, could it be possible for MAUI to run on the web? I think Javier might know more about this. So this is actually a feature that is requested often, but there's not any plans for a web target right now, I think.
Yes, exactly. So the point is, like, for the release for the Q2 of next year, we will support, as probably everybody knows, iOS, Android, Windows, and macOS. Windows using WinUI 3 and macOS using Mac Catalyst. And in the middle, we have received some interesting requests from many developers, from some companies about web support. Also, we are receiving some requests about Linux. I started a community project to include Linux support. And we already are doing some tests. Like, for example, just before the chat, I was sharing with everybody that with MAUI graphics control, that is just a library using Skiashar or some drawing native APIs to create some drone controls. I have explored these libraries in other platforms, for example, in Linux with Skiashar, and it's interesting to explore also in web, etc. So we definitely have some requests. We definitely are doing some test prototypes, and of course we listening all the feedback. We try to cover and offer the best possible option, the best possible framework as possible. But we have some timing, we have some limitations, and for now, the only thing that for sure we will cover is the official announced platforms, and our current approach is keep that with the best performance, with the best status possible in Q2 of next year. That don't mean that in the future we will have new platforms. Could be. We are not have a closed door, right? That no, that will not happen by any concept, by any way. Could be, but for now, it's not something that is happening. We are playing with technology, but it's not happening.
Yeah. And Steve asking about Windows platform. So this is specific to the toolkit because, right, the toolkit supports iOS, Android, macOS right now. And, well, I'll take the blame on this one. I purposely did not add Windows yet because the Windows team was a little bit behind in adding the single project feature. There's still even some workarounds you have to do if you want to include Windows in your MAUI app. But we're getting closer. And so once that's there, yes, I mean, the toolkit will support every platform that .NET MAUI supports. So .NET MAUI has committed to iOS, Android, macOS, and Windows. So as do we. But I can't give you the timeline. I don't know if Gerald or Javier, if you have any insider information on when the Windows team's timeline is for like the single project MAUI stuff, but we're kind of, Steve, we're just kind of beholden to them at this point.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it before also in this show, and we really have to wrap up here, but it's all preview on preview on preview at the moment, right? Somehow we all got into a preview state. So Visual Studio, WinUI, .NET MAUI. So we're all kind of like sometimes waiting on each other to finish things before the other one can kind of progress. So that's kind of what is the hold up for those kinds of things. I think we're on a pretty tight schedule, so we did a little bit of Q&A. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I hope you found it very interesting. Let us know. You can see all of our Twitter handles down here below, or you know probably where to find us. So thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions or remarks or whatever, go to the repo, find us on Twitter, do whatever you want to do to reach us, and we'll be glad to figure things out for you. Until next month, I guess. And if you want to, just follow along and get that notification, please click the subscribe button on this channel, and you'll be notified automatically whenever we go live again. So thank you, Brandon, Pedro, Javier. See you next month. Well, I'll see you somewhere in between, but next month here.
Bye, everybody.